My husband looked me in the eye and called me a worthless whale in front of our children on Christmas Eve, and I smiled politely, passed him the mashed potatoes, and said nothing. What he didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I controlled $42 million in assets and had just acquired 60% of his company. Sometimes the most powerful response is silence, especially when you're planning someone's professional execution. My name is Linda Marie Thompson, and I'm 58 years old. I live in a spacious house in Naperville, Illinois, a comfortable suburb of Chicago, with a man who has spent the last 13 years convinced I'm a lazy, useless burden on his success. That man is my husband, Robert Thompson. Rob to his colleagues, Bobby to his mother, and increasingly just that asshole in my private thoughts. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story doesn't start with Christmas 2023. It starts much earlier, back in 2010, when I made a decision that looked like surrender, but was actually the beginning of a very long game. In 2009, I sold my software consulting company, TechBridge Solutions, for $18 million. I'd built it from nothing over 12 years, starting in our garage in 1997 with just me and 2 contractors. By 2009, we had 43 employees and contracts with major corporations throughout the Midwest. The sale was strategic. I was 43 years old, exhausted from years of 80-hour weeks, and our children Michael and Sarah were in high school. I wanted time with them before they left for college. Rob worked as a senior sales manager at TechCorp Solutions, a mid-sized technology firm in downtown Chicago. He made a decent salary, around $90,000 annually, and had always been supportive of my business, or so I thought. When I told him about the sale, his first response wasn't congratulations or pride. $18 million, he'd said, looking at the paperwork spread across our kitchen table. That's it? Johnson sold his company last year for $35 million, and he had half your client base. I'd stared at him, momentarily speechless. Rob, $18 million is an incredible outcome. I negotiated for months to get this price. I'm just saying you probably left money on the table. You've always been too soft in negotiations. He'd patted my shoulder condescendingly. But it's done now, I guess. At least you can finally relax and take care of the house properly. That comment should have been my first warning. But I was tired, genuinely exhausted from years of juggling motherhood and entrepreneurship, so I let it slide. I told myself he was just awkward with compliments, that he didn't mean it the way it sounded. I was wrong. The first few months of retirement in 2010 were actually pleasant. I attended Sarah's volleyball games, helped Michael with his college applications, redecorated our home, and yes, I relaxed. I'd earned it, but I also quietly invested the majority of my earnings with a financial advisor named Catherine Martinez, whom I'd met through business networking. Kate was brilliant, discreet, and specialized in helping women protect their assets. Don't put everything in joint accounts, she'd advised during our first meeting. Keep your options open. You built this wealth independently. Maintain that independence. I followed her advice, placing $14 million in separate investment accounts under my name only. The remaining $4 million went into joint savings and paying off our mortgage completely. Rob knew about the mortgage payoff and the joint savings but had no idea about the other accounts. I told myself I was just being financially prudent, not hiding anything. But looking back, some part of me already sensed I'd need protection. By 2011, Rob's attitude had shifted noticeably. Michael had left for the University of Washington in Seattle, and Sarah was a senior in high school, fiercely independent and rarely home. The house felt empty, and I found myself with vast stretches of unstructured time. "What did you do all day?" Rob would ask when he came home from work, his tone vaguely accusatory. "I went to the gym, met Rebecca for lunch, reorganized the basement," I'd answer, already feeling defensive. "Must be nice to have so much free time," he'd say, loosening his tie. Some of us still have to work for a living. The comments were small at first, easy to dismiss as stress from his job or midlife frustration. But they accumulated like drops of water wearing away stone. By 2012, when Sarah left for the University of Texas at Austin, Rob's disdain had become unmistakable. "You've gained weight," he observed one morning as I stood at the bathroom mirror. Not, "I notice you've gained weight. Are you okay?" Or, "Let's start exercising together." Just a flat statement of fact, delivered with the same tone he might use to comment on the weather. I had gained weight, about 30 pounds over 2 years. Partially from stress eating, partially from the natural metabolism changes of middle age, partially because I was no longer running a company that kept me moving 12 hours a day. I'd gone from a size 8 to a size 14, and yes, I noticed. I didn't need him to point it out. "I'm aware," I said quietly. "Maybe you should do something about it. Join a gym or something. You have plenty of time now that you're not working." The implication was clear. I was lazy. I had nothing better to do than maintain my appearance for him. Never mind that I'd worked my ass off for 12 years building a multi-million-dollar company. Never mind that I'd raised 2 incredible children while doing it. Now that I'd stopped, I was apparently worthless. I joined a gym. Not because Rob told me to, but because I needed somewhere to go to escape his increasingly toxic presence. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where I could process the growing realization that my husband didn't respect me and possibly never had. By 2014, Rob had escalated from passive-aggressive comments to outright insults. We were at a 4th of July barbecue at his colleague's house when I overheard him talking to a group of men near the grill. "Linda used to run a little consulting business," he was saying, beer in hand. "Sold it for a decent amount, so now she's a lady of leisure. Must be nice to retire at 43, right?" The way he said, "little consulting business," made my blood boil. TechBridge had been anything but little. We'd had multi-million-dollar contracts, but he'd reduced it to a hobby, something cute I'd done to keep busy before settling into my real role as his domestic support system. I didn't confront him that night. I was already learning that confrontation only made things worse. Instead, I started documenting. I began keeping a journal, noting dates, comments, and contexts. I didn't know why I was doing it. Some instinct for self-preservation, perhaps. The years between 2014 and 2020 blurred together in a haze of low-grade misery. Rob's contempt became the background noise of my life. He criticized my cooking, my clothes, my friends, my weight, my spending, my hobbies. Nothing I did was right. According to him, I contributed nothing to our household, despite the fact that I'd paid off our mortgage and still managed all the cooking, cleaning, and household administration. I stayed for complicated reasons. Our children, though adults, still came home for holidays. I didn't want to disrupt their sense of family stability. I also felt a creeping shame about the situation. How do you explain to your successful children that their father treats you like garbage? How do you admit that the strong, capable woman who built a company from nothing had somehow become a verbal punching bag? But I wasn't completely passive. Through Kate Martinez, I'd been steadily growing my investment portfolio. By 2020, my separate accounts had grown to $32 million through careful investments in tech stocks, real estate, and a few strategic angel investments in startups. Rob knew nothing about this. He assumed I'd spent most of my sale money on the house and joint savings. Kate and I had lunch quarterly to review my portfolio, always at restaurants far from Naperville where we wouldn't run into anyone Rob knew. "You know you don't have to stay with him," Kate said gently during a lunch in 2019. "You have more than enough money to live independently and very comfortably." "I know," I'd replied, pushing pasta around my plate. "It's complicated." Abuse usually is. The word abuse shocked me. "He doesn't hit me." "Linda, there are many kinds of abuse. What you've described, the constant criticism, the belittling, the isolation from your own accomplishments, that's emotional abuse. It's real, it's harmful, and you don't deserve it." I'd cried in that restaurant, quietly, into my napkin. Hearing someone name what was happening to me gave it a weight I'd been trying to deny. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in October 2023. I was sitting in my home office. Rob called it that room where you waste time on the computer, reviewing my investment portfolio when Kate Martinez's number flashed on my screen. "Linda, I have something interesting for you," she said. her voice carrying that particular excitement she got when discussing lucrative opportunities. "Remember how you've been looking for meaningful investments? Something beyond stocks and real estate?" I leaned back in my chair, curious. "I'm listening. TechCorp Solutions is being quietly shopped around. The current owners want to retire, and they're looking for a private acquisition rather than going public. My firm has been approached to help structure the deal." My heart stuttered. TechCorp Solutions, Rob's company. The place where he'd worked for 22 years, climbing from sales associate to senior sales manager. The company he talked about constantly, the source of his identity and, apparently, his superiority over his unemployed wife. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked carefully. "Because the asking price is $48 million, and they want a quick, quiet sale. I have 3 other investors interested, but we'd need a majority stakeholder to make the consortium work. With your assets, you could take 60% ownership. The others would split the remaining 40%. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at our manicured lawn. Rob had complained just last week that I'd hired a landscaping service instead of doing the yard work myself. "What would someone with nothing to do all day need a landscaping service for?" he'd sneered. "What's the timeline?" I heard myself asking. "They want to close by December 1st. We'd need your commitment within 2 weeks." "And the current management structure?" "Stays in place initially. The consortium would own the company, but daily operations would continue as normal for at least 6 months while we assess everything. After that, well, new ownership typically means new strategic direction." I understood what she wasn't saying directly. New ownership meant I could eventually replace anyone I wanted, including senior sales managers who'd outlived their usefulness. "I need to think about it," I said, though I already knew my answer. "Think quickly. This is a solid company with steady revenue, $23 million annually with good growth projections. Even without the personal angle, it's an excellent investment." After we hung up, I sat in my office for nearly an hour, mind racing. This wasn't just an investment opportunity. This was power. Real, tangible power over the man who'd spent 13 years making me feel powerless. But I had to be smart. Rob could never know I was involved until the moment I wanted him to know. The acquisition would need to be structured carefully, with layers of legal separation between my name and the ownership papers. Over the next week, I researched TechCorp Solutions exhaustively. I read every public filing, every industry review, every piece of available financial data. The company was solid, not spectacular, but stable and profitable. They specialized in IT infrastructure solutions for mid-sized businesses, primarily in the Chicago area, but expanding into Wisconsin and Indiana. I also paid attention to Rob's comments about work with new intensity. "Henderson is an idiot," he announced one evening, referring to TechCorp's current CEO. "The man has no vision. He's been coasting on the same client base for 5 years without any real growth strategy." I murmured, pretending to focus on my book. If I were running things, I'd diversify into cloud services, maybe acquire a few smaller competitors. But Henderson doesn't listen to anyone. He'll probably run the company into the ground eventually. I filed that information away. Rob thought he deserved to run TechCorp. He'd probably been passed over for promotion multiple times, feeding his resentment and, by extension, his need to dominate someone, me. On October 23rd, I met Kate and her legal team at her downtown Chicago office. She'd assembled 2 other investors, David Park, who owned a successful chain of restaurants, and Susan Mitchell, a real estate developer. Both were putting in $8 million each. My contribution would be $28 million, giving me 58.3% ownership, which we rounded to 60% for simplicity. "The structure will be a limited liability company," explained Jennifer Chen, Kate's corporate attorney. "Thompson Holdings LLC will own 60%, Park Investments will own 20%, and Mitchell Properties will own 20%. Your name won't appear on any public-facing documents, Linda. Everything will be under the LLC, and the LLC's ownership details are private." "What about due diligence?" asked David Park, a serious man in his 50s. "I assume we're getting full access to their books?" "Already underway," Kate confirmed. Preliminary review shows everything is clean, no major liabilities, no pending lawsuits, solid client retention rate. The owners genuinely just want to retire. They're both in their 70s. Susan Mitchell, an elegant woman with silver hair, looked at me directly. Kate mentioned you have a personal connection to this company. Should we be concerned about that affecting business judgment? I appreciated her directness. My husband works there as a sales manager. He doesn't know about my involvement, and won't until I decide the time is right. My interest is primarily financial. This is a good investment regardless of personal factors. That wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. TechCorp was a good investment. The fact that it also gave me leverage over Rob was simply a very satisfying bonus. We signed the preliminary agreements on October 30th. The closing date was set for November 22nd, with the official announcement to TechCorp employees planned for early December. The current owners, Henderson and his partner Wallace, would stay on as consultants for 3 months, then retire completely. That evening, Rob came home complaining about mysterious changes at work. "Weird energy at the office today," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door, right where I'd trip over it if I wasn't careful, as usual. "Henderson's been in closed-door meetings all week. Rumors are flying about a possible sale." "Really?" I kept my voice neutral while stirring pasta sauce. "Would that affect your job?" "Who knows? New owners usually clean house eventually. But I'm one of the top performers in sales, generated $3.2 million in revenue last year alone. They'd be idiots to let me go." His arrogance was breathtaking. He genuinely believed he was indispensable, despite the fact that I'd reviewed the sales data and knew he was actually middle of the pack in terms of performance. 3 other sales managers had generated higher revenue, and 2 of them had better client retention rates. "I'm sure you'll be fine," I said mildly. "Of course I will. Unlike some people, I actually contribute value." He glanced at me, and there it was again, that look of barely concealed contempt. "What did you do today? Let me guess. Lunch with Rebecca, maybe some shopping, then home to watch your shows?" Actually, I'd spent the day finalizing a $48 million corporate acquisition, but I just smiled and said, "Something like that." The closing happened on schedule. On November 22nd, I sat in a conference room in downtown Chicago with Kate, David, Susan, our attorneys, and the sellers. We signed mountains of paperwork, transferred astronomical sums of money, and just like that, I became the majority owner of TechCorp Solutions. Henderson shook my hand, looking tired but relieved. "I hope you'll take good care of the company and our people. We've built something solid here." "I intend to honor that," I assured him. And I meant it, for most of the employees. There was one particular senior sales manager whose future was decidedly less secure. The official announcement went out to TechCorp employees on December 1st, a Friday. It was carefully worded. The company had been acquired by a private investment consortium. Current management would remain in place during a transition period. No immediate changes were anticipated, and more information would be provided after the holidays. Rob came home that evening agitated. "Did I tell you? The sale went through. Some mysterious investment group bought us. Nobody knows who they are." The announcement was deliberately vague. "How do you feel about that?" I asked, genuinely curious about his reaction. Nervous, honestly. Private equity firms usually gut companies for profit. They might slash benefits, cut positions, outsource everything. He loosened his tie, looking genuinely worried for once. "I should update my resume, just in case." Part of me felt a twinge of something. Not quite sympathy, but an echo of the connection we'd once had before years of cruelty had eroded it completely. This was still the man I'd married 36 years ago, the father of my children. But then he added, "At least if I get laid off, we won't be completely screwed. We have the house paid off and some savings, though it'll be tight living on just my severance and unemployment. You certainly can't get a job at your age and weight." The twinge evaporated. This man had no idea who I was, what I was capable of, or what I'd accomplished. To him, I would always be the worthless, lazy whale taking up space in his life. Well, he was about to get an education. Christmas 2023 started like every other holiday in recent years. Tense, performative, and centered entirely around Rob's comfort. Michael had flown in from Seattle on December 22nd, and Sarah arrived from Austin the following day. I'd decorated the house, planned the menu, and bought thoughtful gifts for everyone while Rob complained about the expense and hassle of hosting. "Do they really need to stay here?" he'd grumbled while I made up the guest rooms. "They're adults. They could get a hotel." "They're our children, Rob. They're staying in their childhood home for Christmas." "Your children, maybe. They barely talk to me anymore." There was truth in that, though he seemed incapable of recognizing why. Both Michael and Sarah had become increasingly distant from their father over the years, particularly after they'd witnessed his treatment of me during their college breaks. Sarah had confronted him about it once, during Thanksgiving 2019, and he'd dismissed her concerns as feminist nonsense and disrespect for her father. Their relationship had never recovered. Christmas Eve dinner was my specialty: roasted turkey, garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, homemade rolls, and apple pie. I'd spent most of the day cooking while Rob watched football and criticized everything from the kitchen noise to the temperature of the house. We sat down to eat at 7 o'clock. Michael, now 35 and working as a software engineer in Seattle, talked about a promotion he'd recently received. Sarah, 32 and teaching high school English in Austin, shared stories about her students. The conversation was pleasant, almost normal, and I allowed myself to relax slightly. That was my mistake. "Mom, this turkey is incredible," Sarah said, smiling at me. "You've outdone yourself." "Thank you, sweetheart. I'm glad you're enjoying it." Rob made a dismissive sound. "It's dry. You overcooked it again." The table went silent. I felt my face flush, but kept my voice even. "I used a meat thermometer. It's at exactly the right temperature." "If you say so." He reached for more potatoes, then looked at my plate pointedly. "Maybe you should skip the carbs tonight. You've put on more weight since Thanksgiving." Michael's fork clattered against his plate. "Dad, that's completely inappropriate." "I'm just being honest. Your mother has let herself go, and someone needs to say something. Look at her. She's gotten huge." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Not because it was shocking. I'd heard worse from him in private, but because he'd said it in front of our children, on Christmas Eve, as if commenting on my weight was as acceptable as discussing the weather. "Rob, stop." My voice came out quieter than I intended. "Stop what? Telling the truth? You sit around this house all day doing nothing. The least you could do is take care of yourself. Get a job, you useless whale." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Michael stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, not for herself, but for me. "Get out," Michael said, his voice shaking with fury. "Get out of this house, right now." Rob laughed, actually laughed. "Excuse me? This is my house. I pay the mortgage." "The house is paid off," I interrupted, finding my voice. "I paid it off in 2010 with money from my company." "You don't pay a mortgage." "I pay the bills, the property taxes, the utilities," he shot back, "while you sit here contributing nothing, and I will not be spoken to this way by my own son in my own home." "It's Mom's home too," Sarah said, standing beside her brother. "And you just called her a useless whale at Christmas dinner. What is wrong with you?" "Nothing is wrong with me. What's wrong is that I've carried this family financially for years while your mother plays at retirement, and nobody appreciates it. I work 60 hours a week. You work 40 hours a week," I said quietly. "I've seen your schedule, and my investments provide more income than your salary. I just don't talk about it." His face reddened. "What investments? You spent that money years ago." "No, Rob, I invested it, and it's grown substantially. But you've never asked about it because you've never respected anything I've done. This is ridiculous." He threw his napkin on the table. "I don't have to listen to this. Either your children apologize for their disrespect, or they can leave, right now." Michael looked at me, then at his father. "I'll leave. I'm not staying in a house where you treat Mom like garbage." "Same," Sarah added. "This is disgusting, Dad. I don't even recognize you anymore." "Fine. Go, both of you, and don't bother coming back until you remember how to respect your father." They left within the hour, both hugging me tightly and whispering apologies I didn't need. After Michael's rental car pulled away from the curb with Sarah in the passenger seat, I stood in the driveway under the December stars and made a decision. I was done. Completely, irrevocably done. Rob was already in his recliner watching television when I came back inside, acting as if nothing had happened. The remnants of our Christmas Eve dinner still sat on the table. The turkey I'd cooked for hours, the pie I'd made from scratch, all of it abandoned and going cold. I cleared the table mechanically, wrapped leftovers, loaded the dishwasher. Rob didn't offer to help, didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge that he'd just driven both of our children out of the house on Christmas Eve. When I finally finished cleaning the kitchen, it was nearly midnight. "I'm going to bed," I announced to the living room. "Whatever," he replied without looking away from the television. In our bedroom, I pulled out my laptop and sent an email to Jennifer Chen, the attorney who'd handled the TechCorp acquisition. "Jennifer, I need to discuss divorce proceedings. Are you available for a consultation after the holidays?" Her response came through within minutes. She was apparently also awake late on Christmas Eve. "Absolutely. I can refer you to an excellent family law specialist, or if you prefer, our firm has a domestic relations division." "I'm so sorry, Linda." "Let me know how I can help," I responded. "I want the best. Cost is not an issue, and I need someone who can be discreet and move quickly. I'll connect you with Melissa Warren. She's the best divorce attorney in Illinois. Expect her email tomorrow." I closed the laptop and looked around the bedroom I'd shared with Rob for 36 years. We'd bought this house in 1989 when Michael was just a baby. I'd loved this room once, the large windows overlooking the backyard, the walk-in closet I'd organized meticulously, the comfortable king bed where we'd once talked for hours about our dreams and plans. Now it felt like a prison cell decorated in neutrals and passive aggression. On Christmas morning, Rob acted as if nothing had happened. "Merry Christmas," he said, handing me a wrapped box. Inside was a cookbook titled Healthy Eating for Seniors and a gym membership gift certificate. I stared at these gifts, both essentially calling me old and fat, and felt nothing but cold clarity. "Thank you," I said evenly. "Your gift is in the office." I'd bought him an expensive watch weeks ago, before the dinner disaster. He opened it with barely concealed disappointment. Apparently, he'd been hoping for something bigger. "Nice," he said flatly. "Thanks. We spent Christmas Day in different rooms." He watched football. I responded to Melissa Warren's email, setting up a consultation for December 27th. I also called both children to apologize for their father's behavior. "Mom, you don't need to apologize for him," Michael said firmly. "He's the one who should be apologizing. Are you okay?" "I'm going to be," I assured him. "I promise." Sarah was more direct. "Leave him, Mom, please. You've put up with this for too long. You deserve so much better." "I know, sweetheart. I'm working on it." The consultation with Melissa Warren happened at her office in downtown Chicago on a cold Wednesday morning. She was a sharp woman in her mid-50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Walk me through the marriage," she instructed, recording device running. "Start with the good parts, then tell me when and how it changed." I spent 2 hours detailing 36 years of marriage, the early happiness, the slow erosion, the escalating verbal abuse, the complete dismissal of my accomplishments and contributions. Melissa took notes steadily, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Do you have documentation of the abuse?" she asked. I kept journals starting in 2014, dates, quotes, contexts. I also have recordings from the past year. I'd started using my phone to record particularly vicious arguments, insurance against gaslighting myself into thinking things weren't as bad as they felt. "Excellent. What about finances?" I handed her a folder containing complete documentation of all accounts, joint and separate. Her eyebrows rose as she reviewed the numbers. "You have $34 million in separate accounts that he doesn't know about." "Correct. From the sale of my company in 2009, invested and grown over the years. He knows I sold the company, but thinks I spent most of the money on the house and joint savings." And you recently acquired majority ownership in his employer? Through an LLC structure, yes. 60% ownership. He has no idea. Melissa leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing at her lips. Linda, I've been practicing family law for 28 years, and this is one of the more interesting cases I've encountered. Here's what I recommend. Melissa Warren's strategy was elegant in its precision. We would document everything, build an airtight case, and then strike on multiple fronts simultaneously, personal and professional. But timing was critical. The divorce filing should coincide with your reveal as CEO, Melissa explained during our second meeting in early January 2024. Maximum impact, minimum opportunity for him to regroup or retaliate. We'll serve him with papers the same day you walk into TechCorp as the new chief executive. Won't that seem vindictive? I asked, not because I cared about appearing vindictive, but because I wanted to understand all angles. Vindictive would be destroying him for sport. Strategic is protecting yourself and your assets while extracting yourself from an abusive situation. There's a difference. She slid a document across her desk. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, not community property. Given the documentation of abuse, your separate premarital assets, and the fact that you can prove those assets were kept separate throughout the marriage, you'll retain the vast majority of your wealth. What about the house? You paid it off with your money in 2010. We have the bank records. It's yours. She made a note. He'll likely try to claim he's entitled to compensation for household expenses he covered during your retirement, but we can counter that with evidence of financial abuse and your actual contributions to household income through investment returns. Over the next month, I worked with Melissa to assemble a comprehensive divorce filing. We gathered bank statements, investment records, property deeds, and my detailed journals documenting years of emotional abuse. I also provided recordings from the Christmas Eve incident. I'd been recording on my phone when Rob exploded, capturing every vicious word. This is damning, Melissa said after listening to the recording. Calling you a useless whale in front of your children on Christmas Eve. His attorney will have a hard time defending this. Simultaneously, I worked with Kate Martinez and Jennifer Chen to prepare for my official role at TechCorp. The plan was for me to assume the CEO position in mid-February, after Henderson and Wallace completed their 3-month consulting period. We need to conduct a thorough review of all personnel, Kate advised during a meeting at TechCorp's offices in early January. As part of the ownership consortium, we had full access to company records. Look at performance metrics, client feedback, HR complaints. The HR complaints were particularly illuminating. I discovered that Rob had been written up 3 times in the past 5 years for inappropriate workplace behavior. One complaint came from a female sales associate who reported that Rob had made comments about her appearance and weight. Another involved a confrontation with a junior employee whom Rob had publicly berated for a minor mistake. This is a pattern, Jennifer Chen noted, reviewing the files. He's abusive at work too, not just at home. This gives us grounds for termination beyond personal reasons. What's the legal exposure if we fire him? I asked. Minimal. He's an at-will employee, and we have documented performance issues and conduct violations. As long as we follow proper procedure, formal warning, opportunity to respond, clear documentation, we're on solid legal ground. I spent hours reviewing Rob's sales records, client retention rates, and performance evaluations. The picture that emerged was of a mediocre employee who'd coasted on relationships built years ago while newer sales managers outperformed him consistently. In 2023, he'd ranked 7th out of 12 sales managers in revenue generation, and his client retention rate was below company average. The man who'd called me worthless was himself barely pulling his weight professionally. At home, I maintained the illusion of normalcy while quietly preparing for war. Rob remained oblivious, wrapped up in his own anxieties about the company's new ownership and his fear of potential layoffs. They're bringing in some hotshot CEO next month, he announced one evening in late January after the formal announcement went out to TechCorp employees. Some restructuring expert. Everyone's nervous. Who is it? I asked, knowing exactly who it was. They haven't released the name yet, very secretive. Probably some business school asshole who's never actually worked in technology, He shook his head. I should start looking for other jobs. Companies always cut senior staff first. We're too expensive. Part of me wanted to tell him right then that his hotshot CEO was sitting across the dinner table from him, that the woman he'd called a useless whale was about to become his boss. But I held back. Timing was everything. I used those weeks to get myself ready, psychologically. I met with a therapist, Dr. Rachel Morrison, twice a week to process the impending changes and ensure I was making decisions from a place of strength rather than revenge. What do you want the outcome to be? Rachel asked during one session. I want my dignity back. I want him to understand that I'm not worthless, that I never was. I want freedom. And the professional aspect? Taking over his company? I considered that carefully. It's not about punishing him. It's about reclaiming power I should never have surrendered. He's been a bully at home and at work. I'm in a position to stop that. If I don't act, I'm enabling his behavior toward other people, not just myself. Rachel nodded. That's an important distinction. Just make sure you're clear on your motivations as you move forward. Consequences aren't the same as revenge. I also reconnected more deeply with my children during this period. Michael flew back to Naperville for a long weekend in mid-January, and we had lunch together, without Rob present. Mom, I've been worried about you since Christmas, he said over burgers at a local restaurant. That was the worst I've ever seen Dad treat you, but I know it's been building for years. What are you going to do? I debated how much to tell him, but he deserved honesty. I'm divorcing him. The papers will be filed next month. Relief flooded his face. Thank God. I've been hoping you'd leave him for years, but I didn't want to pressure you. Are you going to be okay financially? I'm going to be more than okay. I pulled out my phone and showed him my investment portfolio summary. The headline number, not all the details. I've been managing my money from the company sale very carefully. His eyes widened. Mom, that's incredible. Does Dad know? No, and he won't until the divorce proceedings start. There's more, but I'll tell you everything once it's official. Sarah and I had a similar conversation over FaceTime. She cried, happy tears, she assured me, and said she'd been praying for years that I'd find the courage to leave. You're the strongest person I know, she said, even when Dad tried to make you feel weak and worthless. I've always known who you really are. Her words meant more than she could possibly understand. The week before my planned reveal, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for professional clothes. I'd been living in casual wear for so long that my wardrobe consisted mainly of jeans, sweaters, and workout clothes. For my debut as CEO of TechCorp, I needed to look the part. I bought 3 tailored suits, silk blouses, professional heels, and even visited a salon for a new haircut and color. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw the woman I used to be, the confident entrepreneur who'd built a multi-million-dollar company, staring back at me. Rob noticed the changes, but interpreted them through his usual lens of criticism. Trying to look younger? He asked when he saw my new haircut. Bit late for that. I have some meetings next week, I said vaguely. What kind of meetings? You don't work. Investment reviews, with Kate. He lost interest immediately, as I'd known he would. In Rob's worldview, anything I did was automatically unimportant. On February 11th, the day before my planned reveal, I received final confirmation from Jennifer Chen that all legal documents were in order. Melissa Warren had the divorce papers prepared and ready to serve. Kate Martinez had arranged for my formal introduction to TechCorp's staff at a company-wide meeting scheduled for February 12th at 10 in the morning. That evening, I cooked one last dinner for Rob and myself. Chicken parmesan, one of the dishes he used to compliment back when he still occasionally said kind things. We ate in silence, the television providing background noise that neither of us paid attention to. I'll be out all day tomorrow, I mentioned casually. Errands and appointments. Fine. I have that company meeting in the morning anyway. New CEO is being introduced. Should be interesting to see who they brought in to ruin everything. Should be very interesting, I agreed. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed next to a man I'd once loved but no longer recognized, counting down the hours until everything changed. At 4 in the morning, I got up, showered, and dressed carefully in one of my new suits, navy blue with a white silk blouse paired with black heels. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because I looked so different, but because I looked so much like myself. The version that existed before 13 years of systematic degradation had tried to erase her. Rob was still asleep when I left the house at 7:30. I drove to downtown Chicago, parked in the TechCorp garage, and met Kate, Jennifer, and Melissa in a conference room on the executive floor. "Ready?" Kate asked, squeezing my hand. "Ready," I confirmed. At 9:45, I received a text from building security. "Robert Thompson checked in for the company meeting. He's in the main conference room." I smiled. Perfect timing. At exactly 10 o'clock, I walked into that conference room where 200 TechCorp employees had gathered to meet their new CEO, and I locked eyes with my husband sitting in the third row. His face went from confusion to recognition to absolute shock in the space of 3 seconds. "Good morning," I said into the microphone, my voice steady and strong. "My name is Linda Thompson, and I'm your new Chief Executive Officer." The conference room fell into stunned silence. 200 faces stared at me, but I only saw one, Rob's, drained of all color, his mouth slightly open in disbelief. I watched him process the impossible. His unemployed, worthless, lazy wife standing at the front of the room as the new CEO of his company. I didn't smile. I didn't acknowledge him. I simply continued with my prepared remarks. For those who don't know me, I founded and ran TechBridge Solutions from 1997 to 2009, when I sold it for $18 million. Since then, I've been actively involved in technology investments and corporate acquisitions. In November, I led the consortium that purchased TechCorp Solutions, and I'm honored to now serve as your CEO. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw employees exchanging glances, some recognition dawning on their faces. Several people were already pulling out phones to Google my name and background. "My vision for TechCorp is growth through innovation and integrity," I continued, clicking to the next slide in my presentation. "We'll be expanding our cloud services division, investing in employee development, and creating a workplace culture built on respect and professionalism. Over the next few weeks, I'll be meeting with each department to discuss strategic initiatives and listen to your concerns." I outlined my 30-day plan, my 90-day goals, and my vision for the company's future. Throughout the presentation, I felt Rob's eyes boring into me, but I didn't look at him again. He was irrelevant to this moment. When I finished, I opened the floor for questions. Hands shot up immediately. "Will there be layoffs?" asked a young woman from accounting. "Not as a blanket policy. We'll be evaluating all positions based on performance and strategic fit, but our goal is to grow the team, not shrink it." "What about the management structure?" asked one of the department heads. "Current managers will remain in place while we conduct performance reviews. Promotions and restructuring decisions will be made based on merit, client results, and alignment with company values." A sales manager I recognized from company events raised his hand. "What about the sales team specifically? Any changes planned there?" "Yes, we'll be implementing new performance metrics and accountability standards. Details will be shared with the sales department next week." I paused deliberately. "Excellence will be rewarded. Mediocrity will be addressed. Misconduct will not be tolerated." The meeting concluded at 11 o'clock. As employees filed out, several approached to introduce themselves and welcome me. Rob remained seated, paralyzed, until the room had mostly cleared. Then he stood and walked toward me, his expression a mixture of rage and confusion. "What the hell is this?" he hissed, mindful of the few remaining employees within earshot. "This is a company meeting, introducing the new CEO. I thought that was clear." You bought my company? How? With what money?" "With my money. From my company. The one you've spent 13 years dismissing as a little consulting business." His face reddened. "This is insane. You can't just—" "Mr. Thompson." I used his surname deliberately, professionally. "I have another meeting starting in 5 minutes. If you'd like to discuss this further, you can schedule an appointment through my assistant. I believe you have work to return to. I'm your husband, and you're also an employee of this company. I suggest you remember which role is relevant in this building." Kate Martinez appeared at my elbow, a subtle rescue. Linda, the department heads are waiting in conference room B. Thank you, Kate. I turned away from Rob, dismissing him as thoroughly as he'd dismissed me for years. He grabbed my arm. We're not done talking about this. I looked at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. Around us, several employees had stopped to watch the confrontation. Remove your hand from my arm immediately, or I'll call security. He released me as if burned, suddenly aware of the witnesses. I walked away without another word, leaving him standing alone in the emptying conference room. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of meetings with department heads, introductions to key staff members, and preliminary reviews of operational processes. At 1 o'clock, my assistant, a capable woman named Patricia, whom I'd hired the previous week, knocked on my office door. Mrs. Thompson, HR needs to speak with you about an urgent personnel matter. I'd been expecting this. Send them in. Marcus Williams, the head of human resources, entered with a thick folder. He was a serious man in his late 40s who'd been with TechCorp for 15 years. Ms. Thompson, I need to bring several issues to your attention regarding Robert Thompson in sales. He spread documents across my desk. As you requested, I've compiled all performance reviews, client feedback, and HR complaints for the past 5 years. I'd asked Marcus to prepare this review a week ago, careful to frame it as part of a comprehensive evaluation of all senior staff. I hadn't revealed my personal connection to Rob, letting Marcus assess him purely on professional merits. What did you find? I asked, though I already knew. Declining performance, multiple conduct violations, and a pattern of inappropriate behavior toward subordinates. Marcus pulled out specific reports. 3 formal complaints in 5 years. One from Jessica Martinez in 2019 regarding comments about her appearance and weight. Another from David Park in 2021 after Thompson publicly berated him during a team meeting. Most recently, in December 2023, an intern reported that Thompson made demeaning comments about her intelligence. My stomach turned. The pattern I'd lived with at home extended to his workplace. How many people had suffered his cruelty while I'd stayed silent about my own? What action was taken on these complaints? I asked. Verbal warnings for the first 2. Written warning for the 3rd, placed in his permanent file. Under previous management, there was reluctance to take stronger action because Thompson had seniority and some long-standing client relationships. And his actual performance numbers? Marcus pulled out a spreadsheet. 7th out of 12 sales managers in revenue generation for 2023. Client retention rate of 72%, below our company average of 83%. He's lost 3 major accounts in the past 18 months. I reviewed the documents carefully, aware that I needed to make this decision as a CEO, not as an abused wife seeking revenge. But the evidence was clear. Rob was a liability to the company in multiple ways. What's your recommendation? I asked Marcus. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Normally, I'd suggest a performance improvement plan. 90 days to demonstrate measurable improvement with monthly check-ins. However, given the pattern of conduct violations and the recent complaint, I'm concerned about potential liability if we retain him and he engages in further misconduct. So, termination? It's defensible, yes. We have documented cause, but it's your decision, obviously. I stood and walked to my office window, looking out over downtown Chicago. This moment had the potential to define what kind of leader I would be. Was I capable of separating personal grievance from professional judgment? The answer came clearly. I didn't need to separate them. Rob was a problem employee who'd violated company policies repeatedly and whose performance was substandard. The fact that he was also my abusive husband didn't change the professional reality. If anything, it gave me unique insight into his character and the likelihood of future misconduct. Schedule a termination meeting for tomorrow morning, I instructed Marcus. 9 o'clock. You'll be present, along with our legal counsel. Prepare a severance package, 2 months' salary, continuation of health benefits for 3 months, standard liability releases. That's generous, given the circumstances, Marcus observed. I don't want any accusations of vindictiveness. We're terminating him for cause, but we'll be professional about it. After Marcus left, I called Melissa Warren. It's happening tomorrow. He'll be terminated at 9 in the morning. Perfect timing. I'll have process servers waiting outside the TechCorp building. The moment he exits, they'll serve him with divorce papers. We'll also file a restraining order if you think there's any risk of him coming to your home afterward. Let's have the restraining order ready, but not filed yet. I want to see how he reacts first. That evening, I didn't go home. Instead, I checked into the Peninsula Hotel downtown and ordered room service. I'd already moved essential belongings to a storage unit over the past week. Important documents, sentimental items, valuables. The house in Naperville was paid off and legally mine, but I didn't want to be there when Rob processed everything that was about to happen to him. My phone rang repeatedly, Rob calling over and over. I didn't answer. Finally, he left a voicemail, his voice shaking with rage. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Linda, but this ends now. You come home immediately. We need to talk about this insanity. You've embarrassed me in front of my entire company. This is unacceptable. Call me back now. I deleted the message and blocked his number. The next morning, I arrived at TechCorp at 8:30, dressed in another new suit, charcoal gray, paired with a burgundy blouse. Marcus and Jennifer Chen were waiting in my office. He's been calling HR all morning demanding to speak with you, Marcus reported. I told him he had a mandatory meeting at 9 and to be in conference room C. At precisely 9 o'clock, we entered the conference room. Rob was already there, pacing, his tie askew and his face haggard. He clearly hadn't slept. Finally, he exploded when I walked in. What the hell is going on? You owe me an explanation. Mr. Thompson, please sit down, I said calmly, taking my own seat at the head of the table. Marcus and Jennifer flanked me. Don't you, Mr. Thompson me. I'm your husband. And you're also an employee who's been called to a disciplinary meeting. I suggest you sit down and conduct yourself professionally. Something in my tone must have penetrated his fury, because he sat, though his hands gripped the armrests of his chair tightly. Robert Thompson, I began formally. We're here to inform you that your employment with TechCorp Solutions is terminated effective immediately. The color drained from his face again. You can't fire me. I've been here for 22 years. I can, and I am. Marcus, please outline the reasons. Marcus slid a document across the table. 3 documented HR complaints for inappropriate conduct, declining sales performance, below average client retention, and violation of our workplace respect policy. Any one of these would justify termination. Together, they make it necessary. This is because of yesterday, Rob shouted, standing abruptly. Because I questioned you in front of people. This is retaliation. Actually, this review was initiated a week ago as part of a comprehensive evaluation of all senior staff, I replied calmly. Your performance issues and conduct violations are extensively documented over multiple years, predating my involvement with this company. I don't believe this. You've lost your mind. Wait until my attorney hears about this. You're welcome to consult an attorney, Jennifer Chen interjected smoothly. However, I should inform you that all of this termination documentation has been reviewed by our legal team and found to be compliant with Illinois employment law and company policy. I slid another envelope across the table. Your severance package, 2 months' salary, health benefits continuation, and standard releases. You have 7 days to review and sign. He stared at the envelope as if it might bite him. And if I don't sign? Then you receive nothing beyond your final paycheck and accrued vacation time. The fight seemed to drain out of him suddenly. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the moment he understood that everything had changed irrevocably. Pack your things, I said quietly. Security will escort you from the building. Turn in your badge, laptop, and company phone before you leave. Rob stumbled out of the conference room like a man who'd been physically struck. Security accompanied him to his desk, where he packed his personal items into a cardboard box under the watchful eyes of former colleagues. I didn't watch him leave. I had a company to run. Melissa Warren called at 10:15. He's been served. The process servers caught him in the parking garage. He tried to refuse the papers, but they were legally delivered. You're officially filing for divorce. How did he react? According to the servers, He sat in his car for 20 minutes reading the documents before driving away. No violence, no threats, just shock. I exhaled slowly. Good. Keep the restraining order paperwork ready, but let's hold off for now. The next few days were surreal. I moved through TechCorp's offices meeting with teams, reviewing projects, and beginning to implement changes. The staff was cautious at first, clearly aware of the drama surrounding my first day, but my professionalism and genuine interest in their work gradually won them over. Jessica Martinez, the sales associate who'd filed a complaint against Rob in 2019, requested a meeting with me on my fourth day. "Ms. Thompson, I wanted to thank you," she said, sitting across from my desk. She was a talented woman in her early 30s who'd been with TechCorp for 6 years. "I know you didn't fire him because of my complaint specifically, but he made my life hell for years. When HR did nothing but give him warnings, I almost left the company. Tell me about your experience," I said, and listened as she described a pattern of behavior I knew intimately. The constant criticism, the comments about appearance, the public humiliation disguised as jokes. "I'm sorry you went through that," I told her sincerely. "And I'm sorry previous management didn't protect you better. That changes now. I want TechCorp to be a place where talent is valued and everyone is treated with respect." "Thank you." She hesitated. "Is it true you were married to him?" Word had obviously spread. I'd known it would. "Yes, we're divorcing." "I'm sorry. That must be complicated." "It's liberating, actually. Sometimes the best thing you can do is remove toxic people from your life, whether that's a bad colleague or a worse husband." She smiled at that, and I saw relief in her eyes. Over the following weeks, 3 other employees came forward with stories about Rob's behavior. I listened to each one, apologized for the company's past failures, and assured them things would be different going forward. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly. Rob initially tried to fight everything. He wanted half of our assets, including my separate accounts. Melissa Warren demolished his arguments methodically. "Your Honor," she said during our first court hearing in March, "Mr. Thompson is attempting to claim assets that his wife earned and maintained separately for 14 years. He had no involvement in these investments, no knowledge of their existence, and contributed nothing to their growth." Meanwhile, Mrs. Thompson paid off their marital home in 2010 with her premarital earnings. She has, if anything, subsidized his lifestyle for years while he subjected her to documented emotional abuse. She played the Christmas Eve recording in court. Listening to Rob call me a useless whale in that sterile courtroom, hearing the pain in Sarah's voice as she defended me, watching the judge's expression harden, it was both vindicating and humiliating. Rob's attorney, a nervous young man clearly out of his depth, tried to argue that the recording was taken without consent and should be inadmissible. The judge disagreed, noting that Illinois was a one-party consent state for recordings. By April, Rob had accepted a settlement. He kept his 401k, his personal car, and received a lump sum of $50,000, essentially his half of our joint savings account. I kept everything else: the house, my investment accounts, my ownership stake in TechCorp, my car. He also waived any claim to spousal support, recognizing that arguing for alimony from a woman he'd called worthless and unemployed would make him a laughingstock. The divorce was finalized on June 14, 2024. I stood in that courthouse in my Navy suit, signed the papers, and walked out legally free for the first time in 36 years. Michael and Sarah flew in that weekend to celebrate. We had dinner at a nice restaurant in downtown Chicago, just the 3 of us, laughing and talking without the oppressive weight of Rob's presence. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Michael said, raising his wine glass. "Not just for leaving him, but for how you did it. You took control of your life." "You were always in control," Sarah added. "We just didn't see it because you were playing the long game." "I don't know about control," I admitted. "For a long time, I was just surviving. But yes, eventually I remembered who I was before I let him define me. Through spring and into summer, I threw myself into rebuilding, both the company and myself. I promoted Jessica Martinez to senior sales manager, a position she'd earned through her performance. I hired 2 new sales associates and restructured the department around collaboration rather than competition. TechCorp's numbers improved steadily. By August, we'd signed 3 major new contracts, and our client retention rate had climbed to 87%. Employee satisfaction surveys showed significant improvement in workplace culture. I also focused on my personal health, but for the right reasons this time. I joined a gym not because someone told me I was fat, but because I wanted to be strong. I worked with a nutritionist to develop sustainable eating habits, and over 6 months, I lost 28 pounds. The weight loss was satisfying, but more important was how I felt: energized, capable, powerful. In September, I ran into Rob at a Starbucks near our old house. He'd aged noticeably in 7 months, grayer, thinner, with a defeated slump to his shoulders. He was wearing a suit I didn't recognize, cheaper than what he used to wear. "Linda," he said, and I heard something unfamiliar in his voice: uncertainty. "Robert." I kept my tone neutral, not warm but not hostile. I got a job. Sales manager at a small firm in Aurora. Pays not great, but it's something. I'm glad you found employment." He looked at his coffee cup, unable to meet my eyes. "I've been going to therapy. Court-mandated anger management at first, but then I kept going because I needed it. The therapist says I have issues with control and self-worth that I projected onto you." "That sounds like progress," I said carefully. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it." "What I did to you? The things I said?" His voice cracked. "I destroyed 36 years of marriage because I was insecure and cruel. You were always the successful one, the smart one, and I couldn't handle it. So I tried to make you smaller." I stood there holding my latte, looking at this man who'd once held so much power over my happiness and now held none. I felt no satisfaction in his obvious misery, but I also felt no obligation to absolve him. "I hope therapy helps you," I said genuinely. "I hope you become someone who doesn't need to diminish other people to feel valuable. The kids won't talk to me. I've tried calling, but that's between you and them. I won't interfere either way, but I also won't advocate for you. You'll have to rebuild those relationships on your own if it's possible." He nodded, accepting that. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry for everything. Thank you for saying that." "Goodbye, Robert." I walked away, and this time there was no anger, no pain, just a profound sense of closure. That chapter was finished. By December 2024, a year after that disastrous Christmas Eve, I hosted a different kind of holiday dinner. Michael came with his girlfriend Sophie, a software engineer he'd been dating for 6 months. Sarah brought her fiancé Marcus, whom she'd met at a teachers' conference in July. We gathered in my dining room, the same one where Rob had called me a useless whale 12 months earlier, and celebrated with food I'd cooked because I enjoyed it, not because someone demanded it. "This is the best holiday we've had in years," Sarah said, squeezing my hand. "You look so happy, Mom." I was happy, not because I'd destroyed Rob's life. I hadn't, really. He'd destroyed his own life through decades of poor choices, and I'd simply stopped enabling him. I was happy because I'd reclaimed myself. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, afraid, diminished, convinced that silence and endurance were the same as strength. That woman had been surviving. The woman I was now was thriving. At TechCorp, I was building something meaningful, a company culture based on respect and excellence, where talent was rewarded and bullies were shown the door. My investment portfolio had grown to $38 million. I'd lost weight, but more importantly, I'd gained confidence and peace. Most significantly, I'd learned that power isn't just about money or position. It's about self-knowledge, boundaries, and the courage to demand the respect you deserve. Rob had spent 13 years trying to convince me I was worthless. What he didn't know, what he couldn't see because his own insecurity blinded him, was that I'd never been worthless. I'd just been waiting for the right moment to prove it. Some people might say I was vindictive, that firing him and divorcing him simultaneously was cruel. But I'd learned an important truth. Protecting yourself isn't cruelty. Establishing consequences for abuse isn't revenge. it's justice. And sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is stop being silent and start being strategic. As I sat at my Christmas table surrounded by my children and their partners, I raised my glass. A toast to second chances, to finding your voice, and to remembering your worth. They echoed the toast, and I smiled. I was 58 years old, CEO of a successful company, financially independent, and finally, completely free. The scared, diminished woman who'd served mashed potatoes while being called a whale was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and unshakable. And that, I'd learned, was worth more than any revenge could ever be.